All right, strap yourselves in because we're going deep on this one.
Oh, yeah.
This is one of those stories that just grabs you and doesn't let go.
Yeah, and we've only got the one source to work with this time.
Right, just that audio file. Case 228, the Harrison-family.mp3.
But even with that,
That's a lot.
oh, it's enough. It's a real doozy. A true crime story that, well, it reminds you that you never really know what's going on behind closed doors.
Absolutely. So we're starting in Mississauga, Canada, back in 2009. We've got Bill and Bridget Harrison living a seemingly perfect life, right? Nice house, quiet neighborhood. They've even got their adopted son, Caleb, living with them.
Seems like the all-American, Canadian dream.
Right. But things are about to get dark. Fast it.
Like I said, never know what's going on behind closed doors. In this case, this Harrison case, it really shows how easy it is to jump to the wrong conclusion.
And that's one of the things that makes this so fascinating, right? How easy it is to miss those crucial details.
Exactly. You get tunnel vision, you miss the forest for the trees.
So let's set the scene. Picture this. Bridget comes home from a late meeting. The house is dark. Too quiet. Yeah, there's takeout food just sitting there, uneaten, in front of the TV. And Bill, nowhere to be found.
Sounds like a start of a horror movie.
Almost. Eventually she finds him, locked in the powder room.
Locked from the inside.
From the inside.
Now that's strange.
Right. Immediately it raises questions, but initially everyone just assumes natural causes.
Yeah, it happens. But that locked door.
A locked door lights off the uneaten food,
It's like a puzzle where someone swapped out a few pieces.
and then the autopsy adds another wrinkle.
What did they find?
Bruising and a broken sternum.
They say that was from a fall.
That's what they attributed it to, but shouldn't that have raised some red flags?
Oh, absolutely. Bruising, broken sternum. That's not always consistent with a simple fall, especially when you've got all those other weird details.
Exactly. It's like, how much can you chalk up to coincidence before you start thinking, hang on a minute, something's not right here.
It's like ignoring a flashing neon sign that says, look closer.
So let's talk about Caleb for a second.
The sun.
Yeah, the adopted son. Apparently, he and Bridget had a pretty rocky relationship. He had some behavioral issues, some run-ins with the law.
Ah, so there's some pre-existing tension in the family.
Yeah, a lot of tension, actually.
Mm.
He even served time for a fatal drunk driving accident.
Oh, wow.
So you can already see how this family dynamic might be a breeding ground for conflict.
Absolutely. Add in a sudden death, even if it seems natural, and things can spiral pretty quickly.
And then there's Melissa Merritt,
Who's that?
Caleb's ex-wife,
Ah, okay.
and their custody battle over their two kids. Let me tell you, it was brutal.
Custody battles are rough. People can get really nasty when they're fighting over their kids.
And Melissa, from what the sources say, was not afraid to play dirty. Manipulative, vindictive, making all sorts of accusations against Caleb and the Harrisons.
So we've got a complicated family situation, some bad blood, and then Bill dies under suspicious circumstances.
It's like someone dumped a whole box of puzzle pieces on the table and said, good luck figuring this one out.
And you know what they say? The more pieces, the more interesting the puzzle.
Yeah, but also the harder it is to put together.
That's where we come in, right?
Yeah.
Got to sort through the pieces, find the connections, and see what picture starts to emerge.
Exactly. And trust me, this picture is going to get a lot more complicated before it becomes clear. Last we left off, the Harrison family was dealing with more than just grief. They were convinced that someone was targeting them.
And they had their suspicions about who that someone might be.
Melissa and Chris, right. Yeah. But it took a while for the police to take those suspicions seriously.
It often does,
Yeah.
especially in cases where the initial assessment seems straightforward.
Like Bill's death, which was initially ruled as natural causes.
Yeah, but sometimes those initial assessments are way off the mark. And in this case, the Harrison family just wouldn't let it go. They kept pushing, kept demanding answers.
They knew something wasn't right.
They had that gut feeling, that instinct that something was amiss.
And eventually, the police started to listen.
Yeah, finally. They launched a full homicide investigation, going back and looking at all three deaths with fresh eyes.
And I bet that was frustrating for the family, having to wait so long for someone to take their concerns seriously.
Oh, absolutely. It's like hitting your head against a brick wall. But, sometimes you have to keep hitting until that wall cracks.
And in this case, the wall did crack. Evidence started to emerge that connected Chris to both Bridget and Caleb's deaths.
It's amazing what a thorough investigation can uncover.
So what did they find? Let's start with Caleb. He was strangled.
Right.
Oh.
And under his fingernails, they found Chris's DNA.
Oh, wow. That's pretty damning.
It is. Puts him right at the scene of the crime.
And what about Bridget's death? She was found at the bottom of the stairs, but there were signs of both a fall and strangulation.
Right, and this is where things get really interesting. Remember how I said sometimes it's the little details?
The seemingly insignificant stuff.
Exactly. Well, the police found a pair of shoes in Chris's possession, and those shoes matched footprints found at Bridget's death scene. And guess what? They were able to trace those shoes back to a Walmart purchase. Chris had bought them just hours before Bridget died.
No way.
It's like he was trying to be careful, but he slipped up.
Yeah, it's those seemingly insignificant details that can trip people up.
All the time.
But even with all this evidence against Chris,
Yeah.
was there anything to suggest that Melissa was involved?
Oh, they found plenty. Remember how she had that history of making false accusations and being manipulative?
Oh, yeah. She didn't exactly have the best reputation.
Well, the police seized her computer and took a deep dive into her search history.
And what did they find?
Oh boy, let me tell you. They found searches for things like how to kill someone and get away with it, how long does it take to die from choking, all sorts of disturbing stuff.
Yikes. That doesn't look good.
It doesn't. And combined with her past behavior, it painted a pretty clear picture.
So it wasn't just Chris acting alone.
It's starting to look that way, isn't it?
But Chris confessed, right? He said he killed both Bridget and Caleb.
He did. But he claimed he acted alone, said he was just trying to protect Melissa and the kids, painted the Harrisons as the bad guys.
Trying to play the hero.
Classic manipulation tactic, trying to shift the blame, gain sympathy.
But with all the evidence against them both.
The police weren't buying it. They saw right through his act. They believed Melissa was the mastermind, pulling the strings, using Chris to do her dirty work.
So it was a classic case of partners in crime, but one partner trying to take the fall for the other.
Exactly. And it happens more often than you'd think.
It's a tough situation for investigators. Trying to sort out who did what, who was the driving force.
Yeah, it's like trying to untangle a really messy knot. But eventually, the truth usually comes out.
And what about the trials? Chris and Melissa were both charged with murder, right?
That's right, first-degree murder. The trials were big news. Everyone was glued to the coverage. It was like a real-life soap opera, all the twists and turns, the family drama.
And the verdicts.
Chris was found guilty. No surprise there. Life in prison. But Melissa's trial, well, that one was a bit more complicated.
What happened?
The jury found her guilty of Caleb's murder, but for Bridget's death, they couldn't reach a decision. It was a hung jury, a mistrial.
Wow, so even with all that evidence.
Sometimes it just takes one juror, one person who has reasonable doubt.
That must have been devastating for the Harrison family.
It was, but it didn't end there. Remember Bill's death? The one that was initially ruled as a natural causes?
Yeah. What about that?
Well, because of everything that came to light during Chris and Melissa's trials, they decided to take another look at Bill's death, an independent review, and they concluded that his death was likely not from natural causes. They said the initial investigation was flawed, that there were missed opportunities.
Oh, man. That's just heartbreaking to think that maybe if they had investigated Bill's death properly from the beginning.
Who knows what might have happened? It's a chilling thought.
This whole case is just, it's a lot to process.
It is. It really makes you think.
About the importance of thorough investigations, about listening to victims and their families, about recognizing the signs of abuse.
And about how easily things can go wrong when we make assumptions.
Exactly. And that's what makes this case so important. It's a wake-up call, a reminder that we can't afford to be complacent. We have to keep asking questions, keep pushing for the truth, and keep fighting for justice. This Harrison family case, it really gets under your skin, doesn't it?
It does. It's one of those stories that sticks with you long after you've heard it. So many layers, so much tragedy.
We talked about that independent review that looked back at Bill's death. Imagine being one of the remaining family members and hearing that. It wasn't just a natural death after all.
Oh, it's got to be devastating to think that maybe, just maybe, if things had been different from the start.
If they hadn't just dismissed it as a heart attack or whatever.
Exactly. If someone had taken a closer look, connected the dots earlier.
Would Bridget and Caleb still be alive? It's a question that's got to haunt them.
I can't even imagine. It's like a ripple effect. One misstep, one overlooked detail, and the consequences just keep spreading.
And this whole thing, this whole case, it really highlights how insidious domestic abuse can be. It's not always black eyes and broken bones.
Right. It's often much more subtle, more psychological.
Like that coercive control you mentioned? What's that exactly?
It's a pattern of behaviors, a way for the abuser to control their partner. isolating them, controlling their money, putting them down constantly, making them doubt their own sanity.
Gaslighting.
Exactly, gaslighting, making them feel like they're crazy for even thinking something's wrong.
It's scary to think that someone could have that much power over another person.
It is, and that's why it's so important to recognize the signs, you know? If someone you know is being isolated, constantly criticized, or made to feel worthless, it's a huge red flag.
What should people do if they suspect someone they know is in that kind of situation?
Talk to them, listen to them, believe them. Let them know they're not alone, that there's help available. Encourage them to reach out to a domestic violence hotline or a support group.
There are resources out there, right?
Absolutely. Shelters, counseling, legal aid. Nobody has to go through this alone.
It's so easy to think, oh, that wouldn't happen to me, or that wouldn't happen to someone I know.
But the reality is domestic abuse is far more common than we like to think. And it can happen to anyone, regardless of their background, their education, their income level.
It's a reminder that we all need to be more aware, more vigilant, and more supportive.
Exactly. We need to create a culture where victims feel safe coming forward, where they're believed and supported.
Well, this deep dive has been, I don't know, eye-opening, I guess.
It's been heavy, that's for sure. But it's important to talk about these things.
To learn from them, to try and prevent them from happening again.
And to remember the victims. Bill, Bridget, and Caleb. Their lives mattered.
Absolutely. Their stories deserve to be told. And their deaths should serve as a reminder that we all have a role to play in stopping domestic violence.
We can make a difference. One conversation, one act of support at a time.
Well said. And to our listeners, if this story has affected you in any way, please know that you're not alone. Reach out for help if you need it. There are people who care, and there are resources available.
And if you see something, say something. Don't be afraid to speak up. You might just save a life.
That's all the time we have for this deep dive. But the conversation doesn't end here. Keep learning, keep talking, and keep fighting for a safer world for everyone.